We're on. Hi, David.
Ready to go?
How are you?
Hi, Enrique.
All
Well,
good.
I'm doing all right in the circumstances.
You're in DC?
Uh, I am in my office in DC. I go to the office 6 days a week,
Excellent.
and yeah, and
Have you
it's
gone
it's
back to
quite
NYU?
comfortable. I haven't been back to NYU since March, so 6 months, and I don't have any intention of going back to NYU for a while. The international tax program has been deferred until it won't start until the summer. So let's see, is that right? No, it'll start in the spring and I'll teach in the summer. It'll start in January and my treaties course will be in the summer. That's the plan anyway. I'm not sure whether I'll do that in person even as far away as next summer because this pandemic is not going away. I mean, the District of Columbia where I am has done a very good job basically, but we're surrounded by Maryland and Virginia, which have not done quite as good a job, particularly Virginia. And as we've learned, even from New Zealand, you can have 0 cases for 100 days, and all of a sudden they've got a bunch of cases. So
Yeah, I
you
heard
saw
that too.
I sent around the email from Brendan Brown at Russell McVeigh in Wellington to
Yes, I
members of
saw
the
that.
Practice Council, and I was curious what's going on, and he flagged it. It was the very day that New Zealand discovered they had more cases. So
Oh my God. So for those that are seeing us and don't know us, well, let me first introduce Raúl. Of course, it's my partner and your former student. Raúl
right,
is an alumni of the NYU
right,
ITP. And I'm also a former student of yours, but a
right.
few years back at Harvard. So it's always great to connect with you. And the idea of this chat, as I think I told you, is I missed going to those conferences where you and I meet at least once a year
Yeah,
outside the IFA conferences. And what I enjoy a lot about those conferences is more than the technical presentations, is the breakout time in
sure,
the coffee break and the
sure.
cocktails where I get to meet colleagues, friends, and so on, and have this kind of chat. So I try to get a little of that going on through these chats, and they've been very successful. So thanks for talking. They're very informal, and for those who are seeing us and don't know you, a lot of our friends from Mexico, I promote this through Twitter, so a lot of people tune in. Well, if you're, a partner in the tax practice at Caplan and Drysdale in DC, and the head of NYU's international tax program, which confers an LLM degree within the law school. That's correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and you gratefully, we keep in touch because I'm part of your advisory board for the ITP,
Correct.
which you invited me to be part of it. It's a great deal. So, David, as for the LLM, we've discussed this in the advisory board, but what are you seeing? What the reaction? What's going on with the international students for the LLM? Has enrollment fallen? Has interest fallen? Are people, what's going on?
Well, first of all, I'm not as clued in as you might think. I haven't been in New York since the middle of March, so it's been a long time since I was in New York. I do
Uh-huh.
try to keep in contact. They are opening up largely now for this semester remotely, but the international tax program won't begin until the spring semester, which starts in January. And I don't know how we're going to do that, whether we're going to do that remotely or in person. I won't teach until the summer, and I'm not sure even how I'll teach as far out as next summer, which would, I guess, be, I'm not sure, May, June. I'm still not sure whether I would do that in person. I have no interest in. First of all, I don't like the public transportation. Maybe I'm wrong. There are people who do it, but I'm nervous about it,
Yeah.
and so I don't do it. As for the international students, the big problem there is the visas. A lot of the consulates are down, and it's hard to. I haven't followed that on a day-to-day basis, but I'm informed that one of the reasons that they deferred was because of the visa problem. And I don't know whether if we begin remotely, whether people will start from their homes or what they'll do. We ended the spring semester After I left in March, the last 6 or 7 weeks we did remotely. I did it right here in Washington. And that class, of course, graduated remotely. I didn't go to the graduation or the commencement or any of that. I feel bad because I didn't have, a real experience with those students last year.
Yeah, and Professor, that's kind of one of the good things about the program in NYU. Besides all the substantive and program, one of the experiences that as an alumni, we love to go to New York City, live in New York for a year, experience the whole New York thing. And interestingly, one of the one of the many problems with this pandemic, I was a victim of not enjoying my 10-year reunion in NYU, which was due to happen in May this year. So we actually had a virtual reunion, and we had a Zoom conference with our class of 2010. But we're looking forward to the planning of going over there in hopefully in 2011, and meet the new students as well if we have the chance to meet the new class coming up in 2021.
Yeah, of course, as you recall, I have a very hard time situating students in any particular year. I mean, the years sort of blend together. But you probably do know that a number of the NYU graduates, people that I've taught, have gone on to do interesting things within their countries, including in Mexico. But I've just been appointed, I think this is all public, I've just been appointed to the Tax Incentives Commission in Colombia. The head of Dion is Jose Romero, who was one of, he was before you. And then Luis, what's Luis's last name? In Chile is heading the international tax function in Chile. We've got a whole bunch of our graduates in the Chilean tax. So people are going out and doing things. It's good.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the premier international tax programs in the world in NYU's.
Yeah, we'll get back to it. I hope. I mean, I don't know how. Sooner or later, we'll get back. Going to have a lot of recouping to do, but I hope I'm around to do it. I mean, it's. We're going to have a couple of years of real strangeness, but maybe looking beyond this coming year to the following year, I think all things being equal, we probably should be okay by then.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to see each other. I don't know if we'll be able to see each other again in the spring in New York. I guess you probably already not planned for that, but I'm almost sure we'll see each other in Berlin in the IFA.
Well, my wife is looking forward to going to Berlin, so we're hoping to go to Berlin.
We
lived there for 4 months in 2008. Yeah, so we know Berlin pretty well.
Okay, so we know who's going to show us around now.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not sure that. I mean, the city is very dynamic. It's probably changed a lot since we were there. We were there the night that Barack Obama was elected. It's a point in time where we know where we were that night. We were in Berlin.
And that's a perfect segue to what the other thing that I'm so curious. I'm always curious about asking you about what's going to happen in the future. You and I had these discussions. I remember the first time I heard from FATCA, it was a very cold winter afternoon. I was visiting you in your office in NYU, and you told me about FATCA, and I said that's like out of a Star Wars movie. That's not, how could that be? And that was just legislation that was starting to being discussed.
Right.
And I went out and I thought, no, that's crazy. That can't happen. And, we've been with FATCA for more than 10 years now.
Yeah, 2010, FATCA.
Yeah, FATCA. So, and then CRS. And so that's the first time I learned about FATCA and my mind started boggling. The other time I have very well is when I told you when I first read that blueprint for tax reform, and I emailed you and said, what do you think about the tax reform the Republicans are going to, and you told me, what tax reform? That's science fiction. And boom, suddenly a few months later, 2017, we have the US tax reform. So now, what do you think? First, I'm not going to ask you about your political preference, but it's very likely that Biden may win, and if that happens, what do you see happening tax-wise?
Well, I think you have to assume that nothing major will happen, even if Biden wins, unless the Democrats take the Senate.
Yeah.
If the Democrats take the Senate, a lot of things could happen. Then I think it's going to be very unclear. The House will be pushing for something probably fairly extreme. I'm not sure. I'm not at all sure how far it would go, but I would imagine you'd see the following elements. I would expect there to be a rise in the corporate tax rate. I would expect that the rules that they put in place in the TCJA, the international rules, some of those rules are going to get modified, probably substantially. I wouldn't be surprised to see the GILTI rules tightened. There's going to be pressure on that anyway from this Pillar 2 discussion going on in Paris, although I can't imagine that the OECD is going to confront the US on that. And we'll see where that goes. But I do think you're going to see a tightening of the international rules. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in the international area is a real mixture of reform elements and sort of giveaways. And in some respects, it's kind of funny. In some respects, you've got reform elements on the one hand, and you've got elements which are enacted as giveaways to offset the reform elements. I mean, FDII as an offset to GILTI I think that's kind of humorous. I mean, that's the story that they've been told to tell. But as a practical matter, FDII is, to my way of thinking, a clear export incentive. I'm not sure we can maintain that, even if we wanted to. And I think what ought to happen, I mean, nobody will consult me, I don't think, but I think what ought to happen is an attempt at simplifying. I mean, I think that what they did in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and I'm very, very close to that because I spent most of today preparing my exam for the course that I just finished teaching remotely at the University of Melbourne. And the exam, in fact, I sent it off just before we went on this Zoom session. And the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is very complicated. I probably don't have to tell you that, but the regulations are just insanely complicated. I also, another thing I did today, which also brings me close to it, is I sent off to Tax Notes International an article on controlled foreign corporations and the individual shareholder. People have forgotten, individuals are just the forgotten taxpayer in the TCJA. And with this high tax exception to tested income, plus 962, which is confusing, it's going to affect a lot of people. So I would hope there would be some degree effort at simplification, but it just gets more and more and more complicated. And frankly, as I read these regulations, I keep scratching my head asking, who does the Treasury think is going to enforce these things? I mean, taxpayers won't understand them. The agents aren't going to understand them. Maybe five guys sitting around a table in 15th Street at the Treasury office can resolve these, but nobody's going to know how to apply these rules. So
that's a very interesting issue you're touching, because around the world, I think that's happening. Rules are getting more and more complex,
complicated.
But tax administrations are not keeping up with training and folks that are capable of enforcing, administering those complex regulations. I think that's not just a matter of the U.S. So it's also we've seen it in Mexico recently, and that's going to be a problem. That's going to generate more friction between taxpayers and tax authorities.
Right.
Because at some point, and that's just the economics of tax administration, you probably have more capable people outside being able to understand and interpret those tax rules better than the tax people enforcing them.
Clearly.
And so different point of views are going to happen, and a lot of friction is going to have a result from that. So that I think that's a problem.
Right.
But what about tax rates? Do you see, domestic wise, are we going to see an increase in tax rate?
I think you'll see an increase
yeah.
in corporate rates. You might. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see. In fact, if the Democrats take over, I think it's almost certain that you're going to have higher taxes on the super wealthy. I think that's almost a certainty. And
You
I think
think
the
a
corporate
wealth
rate
tax?
rise. Sorry?
Wealth tax kind of tax?
Well, I hope they don't do a wealth tax. What they probably ought to do is have more progressivity in the income tax system. I mean, we do need a VAT in the United States, but I'm not sure that anybody's got the guts to put it through. The problem in the U.S. from a political standpoint is without a VAT, we're overly dependent on the income tax, and that causes everything in the income tax is highly politicized. If you had a VAT, it would take a little political pressure off the income tax. And I think there are people who disagree fervently with this, but I think we ought to have a VAT, fairly low level VAT, but something that would raise, VATs can raise a lot of money, even at a very low rate. And I think we ought to have one.
And you think a VAT could be implemented without a participation of the states? Doesn't it interfere with
the states would
object?
The states would object. I mean, there's three objections, right? The Republicans don't like it because it's a money machine. The Democrats don't like it because it's not progressive, and the states don't like it because it interferes with them. So you'd have a lot of opposition. That's why it's never gone anywhere. But I mean, we need money. We need money at the federal level. Sooner or later, hopefully, we're going to have to get serious about paying for the things that we want in this country.
Sure.
And that's going to be expensive. I mean, we've already spent a ton on the pandemic, but we're going to need to raise revenue. And I don't think we're going to be able to get it out of the income tax. And I hope we don't. The situation where we're so dependent on the income tax raises all sorts of bad situations. I mean, there's only so much you can get out of the super wealthy in a fair system. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't oppose a higher rate. I mean, people are horrified at rates, above 40%. But my God, we lived in the United States for years and years and years with rates way above 50%. But I don't think there's enough income in the income tax to really satisfy our problems. I think we're going to need to do a VAT. And frankly, I think we ought to probably not have it's not healthy to have such a large percentage of the population outside the tax system altogether. I think that people ought to all be carrying some of the load, and the VAT will do that even at lower levels of income.
Oh yeah, and I just read some research, very recent by OECD, that concludes that to some extent the value-added tax in certain, they looked at some countries and some time, and their conclusion is it's not actually regressive to the extent it's believed to be. So I found out, very interesting conclusions that could help other countries that are having some political resistance maybe go forward with value-added tax or even expanding their value-added tax. That was just a couple of weeks ago. I found that very interesting. I'll send it to you because
Okay.
you'll enjoy it. Yeah.
The value-added tax, if you try to achieve progressivity in the value-added tax itself, what tends to happen is you make it very complicated. You have different rates for different, but what you can do, which I think would be sensible, is to apply sort of a flat rate value-added tax and achieve progressivity through the income tax system, through credits against the income tax. I mean, a little creativity would go a long ways. I think there are things that we could do.
Yeah, certainly. So as to the corporate tax rate, I just had a call this morning with a fellow colleague in New York, and we put out a bet. So I want to see what are my odds.
Yeah, okay.
So I said he thought the corporate rate could go back to 35. I said, no way it's going to go back over 30. So above 35, above 30, he wins. Up under 30, I win. We both agree that it's going to go up, but that's kind of our level. What do you think? Am I going to win or am I going to lose?
I don't think that's going to happen.
Like my notes.
I don't think that'll happen. But what you could see is a tightening of the rules on the corporate tax. I mean, some of the deductions could get challenged. I think the international area is going to be rife for reform. You know, GILTI on a standalone basis is the dream of tax reformers. It basically
Yes.
toward the end of deferral. And if you keep the corporate rate low and you end deferral generally, I don't know how much you pick up, but that would satisfy a lot of people, I think. I think you'll see the rate rise from 21. I agree with you. I don't think it's going to go above 30. It's certainly not going to go back to 35. I can't see that happening. But I can see it tightening up considerably. And there could be some tightening up in the transfer pricing area too.
I agree. I think
one thing that I think would make sense, for example, which companies would go ballistic on, would be to include in subpart F a category of income from intangibles that have been transferred abroad in prior cost sharing agreements. So if you transfer, so Apple's European rights would produce income that would be subject to subpart F. That'd pick up a lot of money. That would pick up a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And what about estate tax? It said to go back to 5 million exemption by 2025, but do you think the Democrats would bring it down to 3.5, 1 million back?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think, I think it'll be a midway, would be my guess. I have colleagues who spend full time thinking about what will happen to the estate tax.
Yeah.
But what you could see though, which they tried back when I was in Treasury, is capital gain at death. Now that would be, I would not be surprised to see that resurrected, capital gain.
Okay, wow.
It was very hard to administer. They gave up on it in the Carter administration. It's very hard to administer. And but I think it could be made to work. Certainly when I was at the Treasury, this is back in the late 70s, in 76, I think they passed capital gain, and then they repealed it, capital gain at death. That's what you might see instead of focus on the estate tax.
So,
wow.
I guess another possibility is, going all the way to tax the capital gains at death. That's a very dramatic effect. But I guess the other kind of effect that they could do is just get away from the step up in basis when after the decedent passes away, and then you have this other layer of taxation upon sale.
Yeah, you could do that too. I mean, that's an alternative. I mean, all those ideas will be discussed, but that would also raise a fair amount of money. The step up in basis doesn't make a lot of sense, really. I mean,
Yeah. Even President Obama called it the biggest loophole. I remember something like that.
Yeah. And it's I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Democrats look at that. But again, it's not just Biden. I mean, if the Senate stays in Republican hands, they would thwart any of this. They'd stop any of this. Now, I will say, I don't think the Democrats have to have a 60 votes in the Senate in order to make anything happen, because I would not be at all surprised to see the filibuster under attack. And if the filibuster goes, then a 51 vote majority, they can do what they want to do, and that they might. Yeah. I actually think that the Senate is almost more important than the presidency, because the Senate just stands in the way of all as it matters currently stand. So if the Democrats take the Senate, even if Trump is still there, they could basically do a lot, I think.
Wow. Yeah. So it's going to get interesting.
Yeah. No, for sure.
I mean, next few months.
We're almost there. Yeah.
Are you seeing a lot of action in kind of restructuring, preparing for this potential increasing rates or
I
tightening of rules?
haven't. No.
No.
But Enrique, my practice is I do a lot of things that I think are kind of unusual. I do a lot of expert witnessing.
Yes.
Which is always, in the past sometime. I'm doing a fair amount of work on audits abroad that I am seeing, but I'm not really talking much about restructuring. There is some of my clients, big clients, are doing that. I'm not centrally involved in that. We in the United States have had a hard time just trying to keep up with what's going on. These rules keep on. I have a stack of regulations here that I've dipped into now and then, and it's been interesting actually to teach this stuff because the students come up with things that I never even thought about. It's very
yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of things that keep coming up, and Raul and I, like to kind of brainstorm. We've been doing now that's almost daily, just kind of brainstorming and figuring out things. Of course, for us, sometimes we look at Mexican tax rules, sometimes U.S. tax rules. So it actually keeps you entertained, I guess.
Right. We had one of our NYU ITP persons was the ombudsman down in Mexico for a while there, Luis Salinas. Did you know him?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
I think he's with one of the firms. I think he went with Crayon.
Yeah, there was this law in Mexico, and I think he resigned so he wouldn't be bitten by it. That tells you that if you work there and you go out, you can't work in something similar in the private sector for 10 years.
10 years. Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah.
So he said, that's not going to kill me. So he left before. Good for him. But yeah, interesting. It's really interesting. That's the great thing about our practice. There's never a dull moment. Everything's changing all the time, all the time.
Right.
Anyway,
but you're not going to the office yet, right?
Well, here in San Diego, things are getting better. I think I do this, but our firm had invested, considerable resources in technology in the past, which paid off because now. So, and us, Raul and I, we used to travel a lot. So we were used to Zooming for a few years. I remember, I had back when we were in Korea a couple of years ago, I had a transaction that I had to deal with. So I just did it through Zoom while being there in Korea in the IFA conferences. So we were very used to do this remote working. Our team was used to not seeing us, but seeing us, digitally and remotely. So it was easy for us.
Right.
We opened the office, and I don't know if you experienced this, but not a lot of people showed up when they could. They chose to continue working remotely, and thankfully we've been efficient, and and we kept up with at all levels of the firm. So very few people are doing it. So I think with the next year, one question will be, what does our offices in the future need to look like? And I'm sure your firm and other firms in the US and maybe even elsewhere are going to be asking those questions. So it'll be interesting. We've already had the experience of bringing in a big group from another big law firm, and basically with very little cost to us, because we just assigned them to one of our office, our Orange County office, but they're not going. So we just now moving from a firm to firm in the future is you get a FedEx box, you put your laptop. You send it out the next day, you get another FedEx box with a new laptop for your new firm, and you're now working at a new firm. It's just that. So the transaction cost of lawyer mobility are coming down. So there's opportunities, and then there's challenges to keep attorneys, because it's and I'm sure that's also the case for teaching academics. It presents opportunities and challenges at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I've learned more technology than I ever expected to in the past couple of months. So,
and let me ask you something. Going back to academics, and I thought, well, what would a program, for example, like the NYU LLM program, would they say, okay, we have option A, option B. Option A is you come to New York, you sit in the classroom, you have the human interaction, you have the New York experience, but at the same time, we're going to have a camera, doing, and you can remotely take the class, like right now, from your home country, and and you have a screen time with professors as well, some additional things, and then and that's going to cost you like half of that. And I see, that's an opportunity where maybe the universities, the programs, can add a lot of revenue with minimal cost with the
Well, yeah, I'm
products they
sure that's
already have.
true, but
And
I think if you do away with the I'm not, I haven't been in these discussions, but my impression is that if you do away with the in-person teaching, um, you're gonna be able to charge a lot less, and that's going to affect revenues. NYU, which strikes me as a pretty wealthy institution, is worried a lot about this. And I think there are a lot of professors like me who don't want to teach physically. I don't want to go there, at least now. And I don't see, it's going to be a while before I'll be willing to go up and be in a classroom again. So.
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally understand. Anyway, I think we're on time. I'm going to stop the streaming, and because I know Raul wants to tell you some personal news.
Okay.
And so let me stop this, and then we'll continue in just a second. Well, thanks to everybody that's watching us.